discussion as part of our Black History Month events. Deacon Linda Shockley is the leader of the ministry. This is Deacon Linda Shockley here, and I am humbled enough to serve as the pastor here at Grace Temple. So we welcome you here to our panel discussion, which should be a lively one, and we really are wrestling with this as of current. It's not as if it hasn't been an issue in the past, but it really is surfacing, and it seems like everyone is disrespecting now Black history. And so before we get into our discussion, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to get into introduction of these panelists. We are still waiting on one Morgan Lloyd. Hopefully she's on her way. But we're gonna start with who we have. Lord, we want to thank you for this time. Thank you, God, for being the God that has sustained us through it all. God, we don't want to be dismissive of who got us where we are, despite all of that we have endured in this country and beyond. That, God, you are still yet God, and God, we are still yet here. And so, God, since we are here, God, we're going to keep raising the banner and letting the world know that we ain't no accident. We're here on purpose, and God, you have us here to do something. And Lord, even if it is to make this country better than it is, Lord, we want this world to know, and this country to know, that Black folk are the genesis of everything. So Lord, be with us this afternoon, be with these panelists. We pray this in Christ's name, amen. There is a scripture in the book of Deuteronomy that I just want to read. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7. It says, "Remember the days of old, consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will explain to you." So, Black history and the threats to Black history as of current. We want to have that discussion about what it means to maintain Black history. And our panelists today, we're going to have each one of them introduce themselves. And so why don't we start on our far to your left. We'll start with Brother Brendan. Brendan, you got 3 minutes, my brother.
Hello, my name is Brendan Lewis Coker. I am a 16-year-old junior at Haddon Heights Junior Senior High. I am a member of the NAACP Youth Council, and I am an aspiring computer scientist.
Hi, my name is Chanel Jordan. I am a genealogist, and more recently, I've gotten a new title, Project Manager at the Lawnside Historical Society. Very proud of that. And the reason I'm here today is because of a company that I've created called Visualizing the Past, which provides various history programming for K-12. And I also have a show online called Genealogy Quick Start. We go live every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. You can watch it on YouTube or Facebook. And I'm really honored that I was even asked. This was very much a surprise to be invited here, so I'm grateful for the invitation. Thank you.
Well, we're grateful that you're here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rand Miller. I am an educator and a writer. I teach at Camden's Promise Charter School Network. I teach in the high school, AP US History, as well as being the director for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the network. In addition to that, I am a writer. I am an author. I authored a book, Resistance Stories from Black History for Kids, both an original and extended version. Both of those are available on Amazon. As well as being a freelance writer with works talking about the intersections of race and education, politics, and history in places like the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philadelphia Magazine, Washington Post. And it's a pleasure to be here, very familiar with Grace Temple, so it's just a pleasure to be with you all today.
Well, welcome. We want to thank you all for being here. Let me say that this is being streamed, and so just to let you know, this is being streamed as well, which means you might want to all be on best behavior because it is a record. So let's get into this thing. First, let's get our panelists a hand. So let's get into this thing. We have some politicians in a whole branch of party that seems to be dismissing and even to the point of erasing black history and ignoring it and making it seem as if things aren't or weren't what they were. And of course, you may know who I'm talking about. We have one governor who failed miserably trying to run for president, who actually said that slavery was sort of job training. That those who were enslaved, now we have to differentiate between slavery and enslavery. We were enslaved, we were not slaves. Enslaver means that they took away rights. Slave means that they took away your mind to believe who you were. And so we were enslaved, but this person said that it was job training, that there were benefits that came with slavery. Then, of course, one who's also running said that the Civil War was about states' rights, and dismissed the whole idea that we fought a whole Civil War for the purpose of ending slavery. And then we had to go from Civil War to civil rights to give us the rights we should have been afforded at the time of emancipation, which in reality I believe that there should not have been any slavery. Nonetheless, we're here 240-something years later, still dealing with the issue of what it means for America to have enslaved and then to continue to enslave in other areas. Particularly, we have high incarceration rates among African Americans. We have food deserts and poor schools still. And we had a whole issue in Flint where there was water being drank so that they could save money. They polluted the water. And we have to, every day it seems like something new pops up where African Americans are on a low end and are being dismissed. Another challenge we're having today, and I'm sure you're aware of it, is we have young people, black young people, who could care less about history, at least our history. And if you peruse the internet, you will see a whole lot of stuff, and stuff that is just erroneous, and distorting history, even our own history, to the degree that we start believing it because we're being influenced by others who have a strategy to destroy the black mind. And so we want to have this discussion today around this issue of black history. So let me read something that Deacon Shockley put on here that I think is important as we start the discussion. In 1968, Black History Lost, Stolen, or Strayed aired on television examining the contributions of black people to America and why these accomplishments were not well known. Has world or U.S. history you learned been complete or incomplete? And what was something that's missing? I'm not going to call on anyone. You can jump in. Let me read it again. Has world or U.S. history you learned been complete or incomplete? And what was something missing?
So I'd love to start. Thank you for that question. I'm in the perfect town to answer that question. I was blessed to be raised in Lawnside during my middle school years. And it didn't take long coming from Berlin Township schools to Lawnside School to figure out there was something a little different going on in Lawnside. And I came home and I told my mom, I said, Mom, they only talk about black people in that school. They don't talk nothing about white people. They don't even know about John Cap. They don't know nothing, just black people. My mom said, it's time for you to learn more black history then. And so I was immersed for my entire middle school years in black history. I was being, they created a foundation in me of empowerment that black people can do anything, any walk of life, anything that you want to do, you can go ahead and do that. I saw that in the town, of course. People who were in a position of power were black, teachers and everything else, which is not normal in other places. So that really armed me with a strong sense of who I was and who our community was. The other thing about that is that my mom did not just depend on the school system to provide me with my education. She supplemented everything. When she found out I was interested in something, all of a sudden there'd be books all over the house about this. And so I feel like I don't know what complete means, but I feel blessed that I had probably as complete of an education as I could have. But the main thing that I received that I would say would give it a completeness is curiosity was instilled in me. Asking questions was instilled in me, and not taking what anybody says as fact. And becoming that, I guess I call it today a citizen learner, which is something that my goal is with the students that I work with, is not to just tell them, but give them a way to examine anything that's being told to them. Thank you.
I'll jump in next. For me, I was Catholic school educated as a kid. So starting in Camden and then later going to Camden Catholic in Cherry Hill. So while there was some discussion about black history when I was a kid in grade school, it wasn't a whole lot. It was the primary basic stuff. Pastor just talked about this idea of our students, our young people not wanting to learn history. A lot of that is because we teach the same thing over and over year after year. Dr. King, Rosa Parks, maybe Harriet Tubman, maybe. And then when we do talk about Harriet Tubman, we don't tell the whole everything about Harriet Tubman. And kids are tired of hearing that same thing. So, as a kid growing up, if that's what I heard, that's all I thought that there was. And when I got to high school, there was hardly anything at all. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of the teachers that I had were white. They didn't know the history. They didn't know what they should teach. And so, when I got to college, there was an incompleteness with respect to what I learned in school. Now, at home, there were some other things that I heard. Certainly, there were, greater discussions with parents, grandparents. That's sort of the black space, the black governance space, who we are to one another, where we teach these things to each other. And then certainly being around black people, being in the church, being amongst the culture, seeing certain things, you begin to learn and you pick things up. But in an academic space, it wasn't until college that I got to really get a real understanding, having black professors who actually researched this information, studied this information, taught the history. That's when I got an understanding, and to my sister's point, this curiosity grew. And wow, there's so much more that I can learn, and then that turned into me learning for myself. I didn't need a professor, didn't need a teacher, right? But that wasn't given to me early on. And because of that, there was no connection to wanting to learn, to wanting to develop. And, that's what I see a lot of the problem is. It's not that, people will look at black children and say they don't want to learn. No, you don't want to teach them. And so if you're not going to teach them and cultivate that spirit of curiosity, then you're going to get what you have. You're going to continue to perpetuate this cycle where we say black kids can't learn when we know that that's absolutely not true. So if there's any incompleteness, it's not on the part of black people. It's on the part of the people who is supposed to do the teaching. And on the one hand, last point, I totally agree. We have to do the teaching at home, 100%. But the last time I checked, black people paid taxes. And your taxes are supposed to go to fund the school. And so while we teach at home 100%, it's our responsibility that we hold schools accountable because our tax dollars go to pay those salaries. And if our children are in those schools, then they need to do what's right by those children.
I agree with what was said earlier here. Parents should teach their kids about Black history at a young age, so when they grow up, they'll already have a love for it, and that will translate into adulthood. I would recommend for a parent to do things like talk to them about African American history, and encourage kids to read about historic figures, and take them to Black history events in African American museums, as Black history is American history and should be taught all year round.
All right, so all right. So, Brother Rand, what's missing? What's missing?
So I would probably say that what we're missing three things, in my humble opinion. First, we're missing a level of aptitude amongst educators on what and how to teach Black history. That's the first thing. I've done professional developments where I've sprinkled in some Black history questions for the teachers just to gauge what they know, what they don't know, and it's a lot that they do not know. And so it's easy to take the route of, white people or white teachers are racist or this or that, but a lot of times they just don't know themselves either, because the way systemic racism works is it doesn't just harm Black people, but quiet as it's kept, it harms white people too. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there is a lack of connecting what we teach in a way that helps young people utilize their knowledge to improve their communities. I teach in Camden. There's so many things that we need young people to do to help transform the city, to make it better. But oftentimes the learning, the lessons that young people get, they don't necessarily connect to how they can improve their communities. And so if we can connect Black history, not only to give them knowledge of what happened, but connect that memory with how to utilize that knowledge to improve their communities, because that's really what Black history is. It's a history of Black people fighting against systemic racism to improve their community, to improve their people. And so that's part of the reason why I think that there is a war against Black history, but I'll save that for later. And then I think the third thing that we're missing is we're missing a desire to want to. And this goes across the board. And what I mean by that is, in order to teach anything, you have to learn it yourself. And part of the problem, and And this is not a blame people problem per se. As I said, you have a lot of educators that are ignorant and don't know. And a lot of people think that education is, oh, I'm just going to go in here and teach. They give me the content, they give me what I have to do, and I'm just going to do it. There's extra work that you have to do in order to be a master of being a teacher. And that work, everybody doesn't want to put that work in. And then there is just the reality that teachers are asked to do so much that they may not have the time to put the work in. So there's that. But then also when we have these conversations about teaching Black history in our households, in our own communities, are we doing the work to learn as much as we need to learn in order to tell our kids? You know, it's easy for, I'm getting to the point where now I'm starting to sound like my parents and grandparents with their own children. But I have to remember, you know, am I giving them more than just the requisite speech and spiel and rant? Am I giving them something fruitful? And so we have to do the work. But it's not just us to be blamed. We live in a society where we are exploited. We live in a society where we are made to hustle and bustle. We live in a society that is capitalist, and it is designed for us to constantly work and work and work. And the folks who would want to stay home with their families, they can't. Why? Because they got to work. It's not because they don't care about education. Black people, education is the root of being Black in a lot of ways. But when you have to work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, when food prices are going up and you got to continue to work and wages aren't going up, you know, when you have to work to keep your health insurance and do this, that, and the third, it's hard for you to really spend the time that you want to with your children. And I personally believe that we live in a society that is designed to do that in a way that prevents us from being all that we can be. It's not that we don't want to be, it's that we can't. So again, our society doesn't have the want to.
Others? You want the question again? Yeah, what's missing?
So I'll just, he summed it up very well. It's just really hard to even touch that. I just wanted to add a comment based off of one that he said is how we are teaching the students the history. And that's what I enjoy that that schools have allowed me to come in to share Black history in their backyard, because that's a more intimate take on history. They get to know that slavery happened here in your town. They get to know that segregation, the segregated school is still sitting right here. This is it right here. You can walk past that school. It's not just down south. And so that is really eye-opening to students. Sometimes they get a little mad. They're like, I didn't even know this is a thing. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, nobody ever told me this. I'm like, you're 8 years old, okay? That's why I'm here to tell you this. Now you know this. But they really enjoy knowing that this is where a historic thing happened in my neighborhood. And they're really curious about it. So I just wanted to piggyback on what he said about making it more accessible and fun for the students. When the students did the projects with us I have a Black History Challenge for Lawnside, and they got one Black History postcard per day for Black History Month. And they were to create something off of what they learned. One of the students, they learned the story about Grace Temple. There was, a fire here, and who came. He came and stood up in front of the sign and held up a mic and pretended he was a news reporter from 1923 telling about the fire. Like, he's going to remember that for the rest of his life, right? Grace Temple is ingrained in him and the whole story of what happened. So, yeah.
That are well known, like how the contributions of African American women led to man landing on the moon.
So, so let me ask this other question. Um, Brother Miller, as a teacher of African American history, um, how do you advance uh, the norm rather than the outlier in New Jersey, um, which has a Amistad Commission mandate?
So, in my classroom, I'm probably a little bit different of a teacher in the sense that I didn't need a mandate to do what I do. I'm going to do what I do regardless. And that's really rooted in, again, my experiences of not learning the history. I always said I didn't plan on being an educator, but I said if I ever became one, I would be one that was not like some of the teachers that I had. I would be teaching the things that I did not learn. And so a lot of the stuff that I do, quite honestly, if I were living in another state, probably a red state, I'd probably be booted out of my school for some of the stuff that I teach, for some of the things that we read. There are, just a lot of what's going on in the country. I would probably be out of a job if I were in a red state. But that is to say, my purpose as an educator is, one, to get our kids ready for college, and two, to teach them the truth. And you can do both. So that's what I really try to do. Certainly the Amistad Commission that we have in the state is a help for teachers that need that support. And we should certainly support the Amistad Commission and what they do. Again, personally, for me in my classroom, we read text. We don't read a textbook. We do not have a textbook. We have text, where we are actually looking at what Black scholars have said and how that history has translated into a place that we are now, so that way young people can understand how we got to this point. For me, as a kid, when I started really understanding how racism worked, I would get mad. I'd see stuff like this and I'd get upset. When I was maybe about 19 or 20, I'd look at, if Donald Trump was happening when I was like 19 or 20, I'd have been hot. I'd have been ready to argue and, oh, well, this is horrible and this is bad and this is bad. Now I don't argue. It doesn't even faze me. And I don't say that to say that we shouldn't pay him any attention. I just say that to say when you recognize and know history, then you understand why we are where we are. And it's not to say that I have the experiences of many of the folks in this room who've lived during the Civil Rights Movement, who fought in some of these fights. It's just understanding how the United States was formed, understanding how the United States has had its relationship with African Americans and how that relationship has impacted the way in which this country relates to everybody and folks outside of this country. Then none of this stuff comes as a surprise, to be perfectly honest. At least for me, it's not a shock. It's not a shock that Donald Trump is able to run for president again. Wouldn't be a shock to me if he won. It's just an understanding of history. And I think that what we have to do as not just educators, but everyone in here is an educator. I might have a license to teach in a classroom, but every person in here is an educator. Our job is to give students the wherewithal, young people the wherewithal to understand what the truth is and help them critically think so that they can form their own opinions and assessments. We're not all the same, but if we have the driving goal of, trying to make the world a better place, that can't come without us trying to really build them the skills of critical thinking using history to do so.
Yeah, it may not be a shock if he wins, but it will be painful. Just thinking about it, I'm in pain. Just, but in some sense, this is what America gets, because it has so long gone without checks and balances with all of the isms that it struggles with. Until this is what you get. You get someone who exploits every loophole within capitalism, and that's unfortunate. But America has to take a good look at itself. It has denied and distracted and done everything it could to make sure that there are extremes in the top and the bottom, and hasn't really addressed it and continues to fight against it with its laws. I mean, in reality, we know that if this guy was another Hugh, none of this would be happening. If President Obama did any one of the 91, that would have been it for him. But to be one who has been charged and convicted, and to the tune of $600 million. I don't know how you can just look at that and say, well, there's nothing happening there. $600 million. 80 somehow for I don't know why we use words that are not the right words, for raping a woman. And then you're talking about 500 for stealing for years, which really should have been in the billions, because for years he's been stealing. Nonetheless, I digress. No, I don't really digress.
And about the orange cracking, I have to say that is
Just
part
being
of
straight.
what has inspired me to do what I do. I felt like my head was going to explode off because I really could not understand how Harvard-educated people could just be so, I don't have the words, in the church. And I said, what can I do? I mean, that's when I realized the meaning of the saying, there's no fool like an old fool. I used to think, a fool is a fool, but no, there is no fool like an old fool. So I said, I need to go lower. So that's when I said, I'm going to go to K-12, and I'm going to start in the 3rd grade and get into the hearts and minds, to help to build that empathy so that they see that the world is not just about them and their perceived group, that it'll help them to hopefully to make choices, better choices when they become adults and the world is turned over to them, that they can think about other groups who are existing in the same time period, the same area that they are, but might not have all the advantages that they do. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, but that is part of the thing that has inspired me. My head is not blowing off so much because I feel like I'm doing some of the work.
Brendan, you want to say anything about that?
Really?
But let me ask you though, Brendan. Politics and young people, the whole idea of politics, and there's a historical connection to the politic, because we've had shifting parties in that what we look at today as Republicans used to be the Democrats, and then it shifted that those who were more extreme became Republicans and not the Democrats. Not that they're not both still extreme in some way. One is probably quite upfront with their rhetoric, and others more clouded, more subdued with it. But they may think the same. This is America. So Brendan, how do you see young people engaging in politics?
I know the NAACP has been pushing to lower the voter age. I do think it's important for young people to get into politics to let their voice be heard.
So, Sister Shamel, you do genealogy. Is that the correct term? What's the difference between that and DNA? Is it the same?
So DNA would be considered genetic genealogy. So it's a branch of family history research or genealogy. Yes.
So in genealogy, you're looking at what specifically? If it's not specific genetic, what do you?
So you are used, so DNA is genetic. So you're connecting to other people based off of your DNA. And genealogy is creating the paper trail to connect you to other people.
Yeah. And so when you engage young people in terms of genealogy, I assume where they came from and who they're connected to. That may be simplistic, but when you engage young people, how interested are they in the subject?
What I'm doing now is more so using genealogical research techniques to find the Black history in your backyard, as opposed to looking at books which regurgitate each other's information, even though that they're lies. I go after the actual primary sources. And so, and then I share the primary sources with the students. And so all the students love to look at original documents. They can read cursive. Don't freak them out about whether or not they can read cursive. I put cursive in front of third graders and they can read it. But now the schools are starting to teach them cursive again, so everybody can, relax. But they love the documents. Older students, I have been invited to start teaching genealogy to a high school Black History Club. And so I look forward to working with them on doing the research. But the older students, they enjoy it from my experiences so far. But all students enjoy the documents. The third graders, they're just like, what is that? Like, they don't really get it. They don't care.
It's it was what's that, like 8, 9 years old? It was third grade where I actually came into Black history, and I haven't stopped since. I tell you the truth. It was Miss Robinson. This is Chester Allen Arthur Elementary School, and we did a project then, and we had to pick a famous Black person. She had all these pictures, the old pictures on the wall above the chalkboard. Do they have chalkboards in school anymore? Smart. Oh, yeah. Well, these are chalkboards, and she had all the pictures of these famous African Americans, and we had to pick one and then do a essay on them. And my first engagement was George Washington Carver. And from George Washington Carver, what I learned, what he was doing, and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention that his study was on my nickname, and so it's an open secret now here at Grace. And so when I engaged in George Washington Carver, I said, man, how much more do I not know? This is 8 years old. And from that project, I have immersed myself into Black history, and this is the pivotal moment for children to really get to know who they are, and it's not just knowing who you are, but to appreciate it. You know what I mean? To appreciate it, that it's not coming from entertainment and all these other things that kind of skew a young person's mind, in that this is where they motivate themselves. And in reality, and like I tell young people when I used to do a lot of youth ministry, is everybody not going to be LeBron. Everybody ain't going to be whoever these musicians are out here. Everybody's not going to be that. So we need folk to concentrate on other things. And thankfully, gratefully, some have become other things. And it was during that time, 8 years old in Miss Robinson's class. Have you found something, Sister Shamel, that you think we need to know from your studies?
Who is we?
Now let me take a poll of the room. We is us. So I'm talking about black folk. Well, really specifically, it would be African Americans, black folk in America. That may narrow it down a bit. Yeah.
I'm going to say something that probably won't make any sense, but I am soon going to be a docent at the Peter Mott House. And it is important that everyone knows that there are so many myths out there, and we really should get away from Facebook history, unless it's from a historical society or like repository. Quilts are a myth. Quilts in the Underground Railroad are a myth. That's an old myth, okay? New myth. Hush puppies have nothing to do with the Underground Railroad. Nothing. And anytime you hear these little things that sound kind of fanciful, just pause and think. We are the ones who need to be more critical thinkers, right? We can't expect everybody else to be critical and tell us the truth. We need to be a lot more critical about the things that we are ingesting. In a nutshell, without me going on tangents, because I feel it coming up, I will stop there.
Well, you done heard a whole lot of folk already. We just knew hush puppies had something to do with quieting dogs when they were chasing us.
This is how y'all gonna say, oh, it is true? No hush puppies. No hush puppies.
Okay.
Hush about the puppies.
So, Brenda, let me say congratulations, and we can all say happy birthday. As someone who was born in the month of February, Brendan, what has knowing family and Black history meant to you?
Knowing my family history means that I know the struggles that my people on both sides of my family went through to get to where we are today. And I know that I can overcome any adversity that faces me. My ancestors were enslaved in Virginia, but since then, my family has served in the Army, gone to college, become nurses, police officers, and have even met the President of the United States.
Okay. All right. All right. This is a true story, y'all. I did a little research from my family when it came down to slavery, and my folk were from Virginia as well. I think all of us at some point migrated up here from some people groups, and I was able to contact the people who actually, the descendants of the people who enslaved my peoples. And I researched them all. As a matter of fact, many of them had the same name as those who enslaved them. And if you know anything about the Upshur's family in Virginia, down in the small town of Nassawadox in Accomack County, and I called, and this brother, he wrote a book called the Upshur Family in Virginia, and a 2-volume book, basically chronicling the plantations that his family owned, the people, and even put in there some of the records of the slaves that were on those plantations. And he was still living, the one who wrote the book. I called him up. I got his number, called him up. I said, Mr. Upshur. He said, yes, sir. I said, my name is Charles McNeil. I am a descendant of the Upshur family who worked the plantation on Brownsville in Nassawadox. And this is around the time when they were doing this whole thing of trying to get reparations from these plantation descendants. First thing he said, we sold the land. That's the first thing he said. I couldn't even we sold the land. and so we wrestle with this thing that this whole attempt to ignore and remove or erase black history, and then we kind of make it seem as if there is no history for black folk until we got here, which is untrue, of course. And the church has not been really all that helpful in some areas. Some we have. I mean, we got where we are because we have the black church has jumped in and done some work for us, and even those who are part of the black church. But we also have been guilty of not advancing in terms of our history, the reading, the artistry of us and all that kind of stuff. We don't really highlight that as much as we should, even when we had the whole idea from the southern and northern black folk with the way that we do the worship. Are we celebrating with sort of a dance, or are we more reserved with that? And we've had that challenge, and in some sense we still have that challenge. We're not celebrating the fullness of who we are. And I say all that to engage in this whole idea about history being a full history of who we are rather than just parts of history. Because Brother Miller, when you talk about one of the reasons why young people are not engaged with history as much is because we keep talking about the same history. And as if the young people did not get it before, get that information before. And like anyone, I guess I would be bored if I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over again. And if I'm preaching the same thing every week, I'm not sure if people will keep coming. And they want to hear the same thing over and over again. Martin King, and then the Civil Rights Movement, and all that. I mean, it's the same thing. And then we wind up missing a whole lot of history that would be helpful to us. So Brother Miller, why don't you engage and help us with some of the stuff that we're missing? I mean, I asked that question, but some of the people who are missed because we're focusing on King and these other folk, some of the folk that we're missing.
Okay. So it's Black History Month, so I'll start with Dr. Carter G. Woodson. I think a lot of people don't know the history of why we have Black History Month, that it was Negro History Week, that it was started, as far back, I believe he started this in 1915. No, 26. Okay, I know he saw that solid 1915. So there's that. We don't often think of those things. We don't think of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and we think of Black History Month as something that was created by one of the presidents, when in reality, black people have been expanding on Negro History Week because it was just too much stuff. The 1 week wasn't enough, and so it was young black people, talking about young black people being engaged. It was young black people said we need to do more of this, where we get Black History Month that was happening in the 50s and in the 60s. One thing that I know that we don't often talk about is resistance, black resistance. We often think about the idea that it was white benevolence that led to our freedom, when in reality, black people have been complicit in their resistance throughout their captivity in this country. That's one of the things that led me to write my book about the idea of black resistance, how black people constantly fought in order to be free. Those stories we don't often tell. We don't tell stories of Denmark Vesey. We don't tell stories of Gabriel Prosser. We don't tell stories of Nat Turner. We don't tell those stories. We don't go into the whole history I mentioned earlier, Harriet Tubman. One thing the church ought to jump on, Harriet Tubman was a Christian. Harriet Tubman was a believer in Jesus Christ. And Harriet Tubman has said herself that if it weren't for Jesus giving her visions on how to lead those African Americans out of captivity, she couldn't have did it. She got hit on the head when she was a child, head broke open, she started having spells, she called them. But in those spells, she'd have them while she was on the trail trying to get folks free. And she said that it was Jesus who led her to go the way that she needed to go to escape harm, to be free. We don't tell that story. We talk about it, but we don't go into the details, right? There's so much that we don't discuss. Another thing that we don't discuss is, I often hear about how many, not all, but there are many African Americans who look at being African American, being black in a silo, that we are black here, right, in the United States. We are African people. Our heritage, again, our history doesn't start, as Pastor McNeil said, it doesn't start here with being enslaved. It starts back in Africa. We are an African people, and the beauty of that is we are one of many. We don't make the connections with the African people of Latin America. We don't make the connections with African people that are all over the globe. We look at it as we're one and there's something else, when in reality, we are part of a diaspora. There is a history of resistance. There is a history of African culture that we all share that has shown itself in various different ways. So it's just certain things to that nature that we don't discuss. Figures, we don't discuss, in my opinion, enough of, say, Ida B. Wells Barnett. We don't talk about how, she was ran out of Memphis because she was calling attention to the lynchings of black people. We don't call her name in relation to her being a journalist, telling the stories of black people being harmed and all these things. We don't talk about her. We don't talk about a gentleman by the name of David Fagan, who was a Buffalo soldier. David Fagan was sent to the Philippines to fight the resistance against the United States. The Filipinos thought that they were going to be liberated after the Spanish-American War. They were not. The United States came to take the territory. David Fagan jumped ship and went and fought with the Filipino revolutionaries, and the United States government couldn't catch him. He faked his own death so he couldn't get caught. The United States didn't believe that he was dead, but they went with the story nonetheless. Why? Because they didn't want black people to feel empowered and liberated by his story. There's so much out there that we don't teach, that we don't know, that our kids don't know, that they're not aware of, that we can utilize in a way to really birth in them a desire to learn more. Last thing, my sister mentioned Lawnside. There's so much history in Lawnside, it's ridiculous. I know that we were going to have someone from 1838 Black Metropolis. They released a story talking about how people in Philadelphia conversed with folks in Lawnside when it was Free Haven in the 1830s, and how these folks came together and they started an organization. It was called the Agricultural and Mechanics Association of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. They created it in 1839. They did a number of things. They bought land, they developed the land, and they also paid for teachers and instructors to teach black people, particularly those who came from enslavement, that escaped. And they did that in Philadelphia. They did that in New Jersey. There is such a rich history in South Jersey that we don't talk about. There are so many black communities in addition to Lawnside that were here, of black people. We don't talk about how New Jersey was considered the Confederate state of the North, about how this state was one of the last states to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We don't talk about those sort of things, right? So it's so much that we leave out that we can just discuss and we can teach and we can learn and really have young people and ask them, what do you think about that? What does that mean to you that while we have these amendments and things like that, that the place where you live didn't want to necessarily pass this stuff? What does it mean to you to hear that a person stood on his principles and went against the government for what he thought was right, standing up for oppressed people? Do you see the connection between oppressed people in this part of the world and oppressed people in this part of the world? This is why African Americans, many, have stood against what's going on in Gaza with the Palestinians being murdered. So those are some of the connections, and let young people come to those conclusions themselves. lead them to it, but let them process it as the adult. Then we can have real conversation with these young people, and you'd be fascinated just to see how their minds grow, and that builds what? Trust with the adult and the child, to the extent that when things are going on and other things that have nothing to do with school, they come to you. Why? Because you built a relationship with those kids.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, so well put. So Brendan, let me ask you a question in relationship to that. There's a lot of things that even our own African American young people are not getting in history. So Brendan, tell us, what do you think is important of students of other ethnicities to learn about African American history?
The stories of African Americans, even though they are about African Americans, can inspire anyone of any ethnicity to face perseverance through their struggles and how they triumphed in the end. All students should know the contribution that African Americans have made, like the various things African Americans have invented, like the traffic light, for instance, was invented by an African American man.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. I often thought, Brendan, that when I was coming up, probably around your same age, we had these bigots. I guess that's the best word for 'em, who would demean everything black people did, but enjoying all of the things that black people made. You know what I mean? And even to the music and it's they look at us and they pickaninnies and call us all these kinds of words, but then they go and they copy it, or they use it, or they try to steal the trade, the patents, and they enrich themselves over it. And I wrestled with that because even the whole idea of a watch, how many bigots wear watches, which was invented by a black man? I mean, it's like it just goes down and down, and we and then we don't even value what we've made, and they're valuing it themselves and capitalizing on it in major ways. You know, so yeah, I agree. They can learn so much from us. Let me say this before I forget. This is Brother Rand's book, so I need you to put the camera down here so I can get it closer. Put the camera down here. All right, and see if you can go closer on it. You don't go all the way in. All right. All right. The book is called Resistance Stories from Black History for Kids, Inspiring People and Events That Every Kid Should Know, by Rand Miller. All right.
Like I said, I have an extended edition. If anyone is interested, I always keep some in the car, so I have a couple in the car. If anyone wants to get it online, I have the QR code right here for the extended. This has 39 chapters. The extended has 60 chapters.
And you say you have some of them with you.
Yep, right
Okay.
in the car.
All right. So this is a question, and after I ask this question or two, then I'm going to open it up for the audience to ask questions. Who are your favorite speakers, authors on Black history, and what are your go-to books or references on the subject?
I'll jump in. Favorite speakers, authors, a mix of young and old. One of my favorite scholars right now is Dr. Gerald Horn out of the University of Houston. He has about 20 books. I can't name them all, but they cover the gambit of Black history. That is a go-to for me. If you're looking for any kind of information on Black history, he is great to go to. Dr. Gerald Horne, Horne, out of the University of Houston. That's one for me. There are some new folks. Certainly, Ta-Nehisi Coates is one. Nicole Hannah Jones is another. That certainly, those are some folks that you can go to and get some good information from. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who is an economist, as well as a teacher of Black history. She's another go-to. In terms of books, I'll give you three of my favorite. I'll give you four. Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois is a go-to for me. It is a go-to. Reconstruction is something that's not taught. It's not taught well. That's even been reported. That is Du Bois's opus, if you will, that book. It is excellent. It's a lot of reading, but it's worth the read. It explains a lot of what we are dealing with today in this country. Another classic for me, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. That's another go-to, just to understand the idea of mass incarceration. Black Marxism by Dr. Cedric Robinson, talking about how racism was actually practiced in Europe prior to what we have here, and then talking about the ideas of the Black radical tradition and all these things, and how our fight against white supremacy is just rooted in this idea of liberation. We've always had that. It's another great read. And then I would also add, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community by Dr. King. Probably one of the best in terms of this book was written in 1967. It's like it was written yesterday. It's like it was written yesterday. So those are, I got more, but I'm not going to go into it, but those are just some folks that you can look up.
Or there's so much out there, which is a blessing. But for online, one of my go-to places, and I wish there were more places that were as comprehensive, blackpast.org is a go-to place. Oh, blackpast.org. The other place that I love, it's for scholarly articles, is JSTOR, jstore.org, where you can get articles. As far as texts go, I'm very specific to like the place and time that I'm researching, but in general, I like post-Dunning School people like Ira Berlin, John Hope Franklin. I love Eric Foner for Reconstruction. I love Du Bois, but Eric Foner feels more accessible in a way. And did I say John Blassingame? I love that man so much. I really wish I could have met him. But when it comes to Reconstruction itself is something that needs to be more studied, because that's when we could have gotten it right. That was, to me, like our first kind of civil rights for African Americans. And just like anything else, they cut us short when they didn't do the thing, the economic with land. Like, and we're here again. Black Lives Matters, we're going to do, and here we go. We're cutting us short again. Like, how do we stop that? I'm getting off on a tangent. But, yeah, those are kind of my go-to books. And there's this lady, Thavolia Glymph, out of Duke. And she writes about things from a women's perspective. So she has a book on women during Freedmen Reconstruction. She has one talking about Out of the House of Bondage, where she's talking about the enslaved person's perspective being in the house. Everyone thinks, oh, my people were in the house. That doesn't mean that your life was easier. You were under the microscope even more so sometimes. So I love books on the female perspective.
As cliche that this may be for me to say this, I've always really liked the books of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There are many books by and from other people about his message, just as Brother Rand mentioned earlier.
All right, let's get some questions from the audience. I'm going to ask them to come here and ask the question first.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Hawkins. I'm a member here at Grace Temple Baptist Church, and I am so happy that is this our third one? How many have we done with this? Four? Okay, well, I try to come to all of these because they're so enlightening. But I'm so happy that we have Brendan here. He's very active at Grace Temple. But I want to know, my sons have gone through the school systems in South Jersey, but I would like to know from you, Brendan, what are they doing during Black History Month? Do you all have any activities? And also, are you all doing anything with politics? Sometimes I hear on the news that some schools actually have a voting activity where the kids come and they actually vote. What is actually happening in the school systems now?
My school, Haddon Heights Junior Senior High, my U.S. history class recently had a project on a timeline of Black history from the 1860s to nowadays. Um, I do think other schools could stand to learn something and have activities like that for kids in Black History Month.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being on the panel. So I have three questions. My first question is regarding Black resistance. Is protesting in the streets of the 60s and the 70s still effective? And what should it look like today? Okay, that's my first question. My second question is, what are your thoughts on reparations? How can we move that conversation forward? I hope you didn't discuss that already because I am late. And then my third question is regarding Black history. What should that curriculum look like today? How can we also move that forward in our families? Thank you.
So my sister gave me the two tougher ones. I'll be brief. I'm gonna start with reparations. Yeah, we need them. Yeah, we need to fight for them. That's just my opinion. So I'll leave it short there. The second thing with respect to protest, I think that protesting and marching in the streets is effective. I would never say that it's not, but not in isolation. We have to do other things as well. You have to protest. There may be times for boycott, and there's always time to vote, and there's always time after you vote to hold those people you vote for accountable. It's not enough just to vote for them, but we have to stay on top of them. Like any good parent, when my mom made me do something, she made me do it, but she stayed on top of me to make sure I kept doing it. So we have to do the same thing. So we just have to look, instead of looking at, again, movements and things in isolation, we have to look at all the tools in our toolbox, and we have to utilize all of them to get what we're looking to get.
Reparations, like I've struggled with reparations because I don't really understand how it can be done. But when we have these movies, like, is it Silver Dollar Road? That needs to be a part of. Leave those people alone. Like, land, eminent domain, like all these things that they're doing to people with land, that needs to stop. When it comes to what Black history should be like in the schools, in addition to being a part of the curriculum itself, the community needs to be in the schools. I am a part of what they call a community educator. I do not have any kind of certification or training, but I'm an enthusiastic person who loves history, and they allow me to come in. In the school district of Philadelphia, they actually organized a set of community people with many different curriculums to come into the school. Um, just a quick story. I was in a school that is probably 1% black, if that, probably like 0.9. And they told me the other day, at the end of my last class with one of the schools, the student asked to have a meeting with the principal. And I said, "Oh, what did I say?" And she said, no. She went in and she said, "Principal, I'd like to know, how do we get more black kids into this school? Because I think that if we had more black people in the school and the community, it'd be a lot more interesting in here." So just bringing the community into the schools itself, I think, is what's needed to help add black history to the school.
You want to respond, Brendan?
What was questioned earlier about the protesting, I do believe that is still effective nowadays, but there are also other methods of making our voice heard through online and the TV. That can also help a cause.
Let me jump back into on reparations real quick. What we're starting to see around the country is that there are states that are giving reparations to black people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to do with enslavement, because there's just as much trauma and stealing that has happened after enslavement. So we can go about trying to get reparations in that way as well. I think that there is a genuine fear behind the idea of reparations, and I think a lot of that is fear-mongering and stereotyping. You know, saying that black people gonna spend all this money doing this and black people gonna waste all this money doing that. And so I think that that plays into stereotypes as to why folks are against it. But I also think this: if we have billions of dollars to send to other countries to fight wars,
Yeah.
if we have billions of dollars to build up militaries that have weapons that sit, and build up militaries that then turn those weapons and those tanks over to local municipalities. There is a law that allows the federal government, for weapons that they don't use, they can turn it over to municipalities. You can go on to, I believe there was an article on NewJersey.com that talked about all the municipalities in this state that receive federal dollars and federal munitions and things of that nature. There's no reason we don't need to have tanks rolling down municipal streets. That's coming from the government. If they can spend that money on that, I ain't trying to hear you say you can't repay families for the lack of labor
That's right.
that they had, right? I agree with my sister here. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how it happens. But what I do know is every time black people in Congress have tried to say, let's figure out how to do it, no one wants to do it. So there has to be, again, a want to figure out how. If they can figure out all the other things that they do, they can figure this out.
Yeah. Again.
In addition to states providing reparations, there are institutions who are doing it as well. I had a friend who's in Virginia, and she's doing research to research the descendants who all worked at this religious institution in Virginia. And like some of the people live in Chislehurst. And I'm like, what are you doing in Chislehurst? Email me, can you tell me a good restaurant nearby? I'm like, what are you doing in Chislehurst? And so, yeah, institutions are also taking it upon themselves to provide which I think is quite beautiful.
Well, I actually picked the mic. There's going to be some more questions. I picked the mic because when you start talking about reparations, then you really get me. And I don't apologize because this country has enriched themselves off of the labor of black folk for so long. And the reason why this country is what it is and as wealthy as it is because of free black labor. And so you have to pay back those who did not get paid. And unfortunately, the discussion keeps going different places grateful for California and others. And Harvard just admitted what we already knew. So, I mean, come on. If you are an institution of research, then you should have already known what you're claiming now. You just found out. I don't think there's a place in America that has not used slave labor in some way to become what it is. So I don't apologize for being more radical when it comes to talking about reparations, because I believe that first they reneged on the whole idea of trying to get us to start after emancipation. And like King said, you tell us to pull up our boots and to tie our boots. Don't give us any shoestrings to tie our boots. And paraphrase, but the idea is that you tell us to make it and to move forward, but we're already starting way behind. And all of us are, if we're not first or second generation college educated, while they're fifth, sixth generation college educated, and not to talk about the disparities in income and other things. And the wealth of black folk over the wealth of white folk is just so ridiculous. It's a shame. So how do you and reparations is repairing what was broken. How do you repair something? First, and I think this is where we really can't get to repairing until we get to confessing. And if we don't repent for what we've done, then there is no moving forward. And America can't even get to the place where they can say, no, we're sorry because we did something wrong. And if they can't get to that place, they can't get to this is how we're going to fix what we did wrong. And if it is free college tuition, that is something. If it is a pulling away from black folk paying certain taxes, that's something. You know, because what you got to do is you may not get a grand thing, but you got to get something. And I think that we saw that when Bill Clinton, on 2 occasions, apologized for slavery. Now, the danger in that is now you apologize, now you got to do something to back up your apology. And both times, the politicians pulled back on him and said, you can't be doing that. He did it in Africa, he did it here in America. And both times it could have put them in a spot where now they have to repair something that they've done. So whatever it is, they have to do. I don't care, even if they gave Japanese reparations for something that didn't even happen here, then that's a problem. And if we celebrating Jews getting reparations, Jews getting reparations in Germany with all the artwork and everything that was stolen from the Jews during the Holocaust, and then they getting paid back for all of that stuff, then surely what happened right here and was created right here, and the people are still here, they going to get something. And whatever that something is, I think we can hold it in debate, but at least say we're sorry. And I was watching this show, and in Germany, they don't have any more artifacts of Hitler's term. They destroyed all the statues, bulldozed the institutions, and there's no more remnants of that era. But here we still fighting about a Confederate flag that folk flying, and they talk about it's about culture. You know, it's about race, and I think we know that. So we can't even get to that point where we have to get folk to acknowledge a wrong was done, now we got to fix what was wrong. And I don't think we can even repair this race thing because of that. They act like nothing happened. Like I said, Civil War was about states' rights. All right, I digress. Not really, but I digress. All right, questions?
I'm an educator also, and so kind of going back to the education piece, like the community piece, but I also think it's important to not isolate Black history and embed it into the entire curriculum of a high school, of K through 12, K through 16. And I think that to go back to the statement about Black history is not just, it's American history. And it's not, while I think it serves a specific purpose for us as African Americans to understand who we are, to instill a sense of pride, to help us to recognize our history just didn't start on the shores of America as slaves, but to instill in everyone the importance of how we have contributed to everything. So like embedding it in biology courses in the curriculum, embedding it in chemistry and English and history, which typically can happen more easily in those areas. So I just wanted to, put out there about the education and how important it is, and maybe we need to have a movement to embed it within the curriculum K through 16.
Reminded me of a book that I was pivotal in my life regarding science, Ivan Van Sertima, Blacks in Science.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for coming, and Pastor, thank you for having such a topic. I too grew up in Catholic school and learning about Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey, and it was always in a negative. and I look at, I guess back in the late 70s, early 80s, whenever Roots came out, that was a big thing. And how we've gone from Roots to the Black Panther movies, where realism, now commercial comics. And I'm sitting here, and as I was listening, and I'm an actor, filmmaker. How can we get a collection of Black? And I'm glad you all shared your authors. How can we collaborate that into the educational system? I look at Channel 12 occasionally, and the work that Dr. Gates does, exceptional. But he's only funded for a certain time period. How can we get more of that?
Dr. Gates and the stuff that they do for PBS, they have a whole curriculum online where they have shorts that teachers can use for their classroom. So not only are they on PBS, there's resources there for teachers for that specific thing. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I would echo that. I think that the beauty of the internet, for all the misinformation and disinformation online, and I think you mentioned that, there are some good tools and research points that we can utilize, even as parents. I hate to be pessimistic, Lord forgive me. But this is America. And part of knowing the reality of history is not expecting too much. And I don't say that to say that we don't continue fighting. We've gotten to this point because Black people have fought. We will get further because we will continue to fight. With that said, I think that the same way I mentioned that we have to stay on top of politicians when we vote for them, we have to stay on top of schools because that's where our children go. The Moms for Liberty can't be the only people at the school board. We got to go to the school board. And I'm talking to myself too. We have to show up at school board meetings. staying in contact with your children's teachers, those sort of things, and not just, teachers want to talk to parents when kid is having something or something going on with the child and that sort of thing. I regularly ask my kids' teachers, what are we doing for Black History Month? Or have you been discussing this stuff throughout the year? One of the things that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, when he created Negro History Week, it wasn't as a point to do Black history at that point. It was meant to be a time to go over all the things that you learned about Black history for the year. And so, it's incumbent upon us, again, to continue to just stay on top of folks. And I know it's tough because we all work, we all got things going on. But that's how we really get this stuff in the school. We can't just say we want this program, get the program passed, and expect the teachers to do the job, because they're not necessarily going to do it. Or the school. They'll say, how do we go about doing it? Somebody has to show us how to do it. As an excuse, maybe some may not know. But we, as Black people, have to stay on top of our school system, on our state, to make sure that they do their part. Other communities do the same. We have to do it as well.
One of the cool things that has happened during the pandemic is that all the school boards are online. And so you can watch these school board meetings, and the dysfunction is unbelievable. And the people who are winning are the screamers, okay? Not the parents who are, dedicated, sitting at home, doing the homework with the kids, the screamers. In a local town, they actually were able to get rid of the Diversity and Equity Council because they were screaming that loud. Why do we need equity? What happened to equality? These are educated people. Like, they have the highest income in the county, okay? They know the difference between equity and equality. But because they were vigilant, they were in there every single month, every meeting, they won.
Yeah, mind you, they also are burning books, rather saying some books can't be used in the school district simply if they mention race and other things, which is a travesty. My brother, I didn't know Wakanda wasn't real. It's like...
Thank you, Pastor. Before I begin, I just want to say, excellent panel, your insight, amazing. Pastor, thank you for putting this together. My name is John Murphy. I'm an educator at Monroe Township High School in Middlesex County. And very similar to Mr. Miller, I'm a Black male teacher, which is rare. One of a few, okay, rare. And my school is now, for next school year, adopting for the first time AP African American History, and which I'll be teaching. So that's why I'm here. I came to get some insight. Yes, so, and I try to take on before I ask my question, I put on myself to teach about African American history and expand on it as much as I can. For instance, my students right now, I'm a U.S. history teacher as well, also in addition to African American history. So right now we're learning a unit on World War II. So I teach them about the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, the Buckeye Bullet, okay, Jesse Owens, and the challenges that he had, and also too when he came home, what it was like, how he was treated in Nazi Germany compared to when he came home, similar to Muhammad Ali after he won his Olympic gold medal in 1960 in Rome. I also too teach them about, when we studied Pearl Harbor, there was a cook who was the son of sharecroppers, who was the grandson of slaves, Dory Miller, who was able to engage the Japanese with a gun, took on a turret, and shot down planes. So he went from Navy Cross, died in battle, Purple Heart, and now he's under construction right now is an aircraft carrier, the USS Dory Miller. And those aircraft carriers are usually named after presidents or states. So we have one of our own. And so I put it on myself to make sure that students know that. It might be sort of brushed over or mentioned in a sentence, and I take that sentence and I expand on it. I take it on myself to really dig deep so the students understand the significance of that for someone like all of us who had to undergo challenges that other people didn't, and to succeed under those drastic challenges. So I think that's important. So my question is, as I'm about to go into uncharted waters with the AP level, I also too have an African American club that I'm the advisor of in my school. And so the population of African American students is not that high, but we're able to still keep it going. My school does, during Black History Month, we have a group come in from Philadelphia, from a church, and they put on a production every year, Key Arts Production they're called. And they put together a video, and they have singers. And it's really good for the school community. And the other kids clap along, sing along, and there's lessons in that. My club also too will do things around the school. They'll see QR codes that they can scan that gives information on Black history and the people who impacted our country, which I think is great. So I'm trying to do that. So my question is, as I'm going to teach this course next year, what advice would you give me in terms of getting the word out to the student population that's not that big? How do I make it interesting? How do I get them to care and say, okay, I want that course?
I would say localize it. You talked about World War II. Do you have any World War II Marines, Black Marines that are buried in the town? They would have probably been Montford Point Marines. They were the first African American Marines. Some kind of a project where they're going into cemeteries or something that's making it more localized, or working with the local historical society on who are the Black history people here. Was there a segregated school here? Who were the students there? Civil War soldiers.
I'm gonna echo everything that she said because she's spot on. The one thing I would add is what I do every year. I ask students, what do you want to know? What do you want to know? And how can this class give you what it is that you need? And so that little 2-question needs assessment can help shape how you go about framing your year to make sure that you're giving them what it is that they're looking for.
About, I don't know, a question about how do I put this, go back and reteach Black history to a certain age group. I'm in my 40s and I went to predominantly white schools, and my Black history was roots and Shaka Zulu, and it was taught it was taught more so as a teasing lesson rather than a taught lesson. I don't know how many times my mother had to just show up at school to talk to my teachers, because I mean, the 2 Black kids, we would sit in the front and the kids would tease us the whole time. So I feel like my generation, even the ones that went to Black schools, we either didn't really pay attention to Black history or we weren't taught it. So now you have kids that are their kids, they're learning more than what their parents knew unless they were self-taught. So how do we go back kind of and teach the parents so they're not oblivious to what their kids are learning?
Zulu in school? Oh, Lord, did they really? I ain't get that in school. Wow, they showed you Shaka Zulu. Shout out to Shaka. I love that series. Love it. I'll just give something simple. Social media. All right, so let me put the disclaimer out, because we have mentioned, and I will say, social media can be a horrible place in terms of finding out truth. Because it's a lot of, I'm going to use a biblical term, a lot of gainsaying on social media. You can't go to TikTok historians. You can't go to YouTube historians. But a good place to go, I love Twitter, now called X, but I'm going to call it Twitter. That's what Black do. We're going to call it what we call it. I love Twitter, and the reason why is because there are a lot of scholars and historians that are on Twitter, and you can follow them. Same thing on Instagram, probably Facebook too. And if you build your own algorithm of certain scholars and people who are in the know, you'll begin to learn about a lot of stuff, and then that'll pique your curiosity to go, oh, maybe I should look at this here, maybe I should do this here. And a lot of those folks will share books They have their own books that they've written. They'll give you, they'll give you other information on other places you should go. And you'll find out so much information, and then that can begin to build for you where you're like, oh, let me write this down, let me write this down. And now you're cultivating and curating your own Black history, and then your mind will expand beyond what you thought that you could go.
I would add, do your family history, and then research the places where you find your family and the time periods.
So, Brendan, you have something to share? My brother, during family history, found out that my mother's father, my grandfather, was a Buffalo soldier in World War II. Not that Buffalo soldiers, well, yeah, but they were different than the Buffalo soldiers during the Spanish-American War. So yeah, because the ones in Spanish-American War were not necessarily. Yeah, that's all I can say. Yeah, but you have to understand the times. Yes, sir.
Again, echo my sister over here. Finding out family history is so, I overstate that. Finding out your lineage, your history, that's very, very important. If you can go back, go back. I know that there are a number of books out there, but if you can find someone, a resource that you can have at your fingertips right here, reach out and do that. And you can even look on, there are public records that you can find. It does take some time, but it's worth the time. And I would, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not as difficult as it's made out to be. Once you start, you'll find yourself what they call going down a rabbit hole where you'll find out all kinds of information, and that'll take you to different places. So if you can do that work as well, I'm just again echoing, please go find that information out.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, it's a statement or question.
So my question pertains to research and research projects. And so Ms. Jordan is a project manager for the Historical Society. And one of the challenges is finding people who can do research or who want to do research and understand how to do it. Lay people try to do it. How do you train the average person to start on that project without the intimidation of, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where to go, I don't know where to look?
You asking me that question? So, I always encourage people to get an education in genealogy. It's like if you're going to go fix your toilet, you're going to get some kind of education on how to do it. Like, I know they're your family, but I would encourage them to take some sort of a course. Like, there's easy online courses that you can take and get a beginning. But genealogy beginning is really all about census records and vital records. And so census records come out every 10 years. And so just being able to go from 1950 back in time every decade, finding marriage records and death records when you can't go back further, and just kind of working on in that vein, that's how you really get started. We have these fanciful stories about maybe the enslaver, maybe even an African. And one thing I don't know if you guys know that Roots was plagiarized, that it wasn't okay. And so that's how you would get started. How I would train someone, I would really want them to try to take a course, or maybe I would make the course up myself. But understanding, and they can watch my show. Everybody watch my show every other Tuesday at 8 p.m.
All right, any other questions? Any other questions? Yes, yes, ma'am.
Thank you all for being panelists. My question is, what is the response to people who say that teaching Black history makes white kids feel bad, and that's a reason not to teach it?
So when I went from Lawnside, which is 99% black, to the opposite, which was like 1% black, I wondered about that. And I don't know if they're too young to feel bad, but they automatically empathize with the black people. They don't as they just say, well, the white people are treating black people wrong. They don't. I don't know if they see them. So they know they're white, but they just say the white people are treating black people bad. They don't internalize it at all. They just see that people are treated poorly. And when you ask them, how would that make you feel? Oh, I'd be mad. I'd be confused. Oh, I mean, they had all the feeling words. I'm like, these kids must be in therapy all the time because they knew. When I was in therapy, they had to give me a sheet of feeling words. These kids, I would be mad. I'd be fighting. So I think it's how it's taught to them because we actually took a course on how to interpret slavery to youth. There are a lot of educators who have not gone through that. I have been asked in schools to put children in situations where they were being enslaved people. That is wrong. That is wrong. And I don't necessarily I shouldn't say I don't blame them, but how things are done change over time, and people should be made to keep up with the times. And that was just egregious. So yeah, there are probably a lot of unknowledgeable people who are making students feel bad, and it should not be that way.
There are age-appropriate ways to teach Black history, some of the quote-unquote guilt-ridden type subjects, like, for example, enslavement. There are ways that you can do so that fit the audience, if you will, of young people, whether white or black. Those arguments, of course, are made by a lot of folks that are being political. Whether they realize it or not, teaching, educating is political. Whether you say something or you don't say it at all, you're being political in either case. And again, to echo my sister, young people, they have the sympathy. They can decipher that something is not right if we trust young people enough. I think that there are a lot of folks that don't want to trust young people because they have an agenda. And so young people will thwart that agenda. Because if you get a group of kids in the room, we live in a different time now where, you get white kids in a room, you get black kids in a room, you get Asian kids, Latinos in the room, and it's like they don't see the world necessarily the way we see it, or I was raised to see it. And that's a beautiful thing. And if you can be honest about that history, they can come to the conclusion to see, well, this is not the right thing. There's no, people are shocked when they see white people marching with black people, Black Lives Matter, and these sort of things. They're shocked when they see, white people stand up. It's because there is a level of sympathy. The guilt is about an agenda. Whether people realize it or not, children see race at a very young age regardless. And so when what Scripture says that we are born in sin, shaped in iniquity. We come into this world and we are socialized to believe certain things and to act certain ways. And we have to be taught against those things. And that would be true of the faith, and that's true of what we see in the world. And so it's important that we, call out the agenda setting when people say things like that, and we trust young people enough to know that so long as we're doing it in an age-appropriate way, that they can receive that teaching and they can utilize all of those emotions and emotional words to really understand what the history is saying, and not only that, but how they ought to now regard people and treat people in light of what they've learned.
The point of Black history is not to make white kids feel bad, it's to shine a light on these stories and the message we can take away from them. I mentioned before their stories can inspire anyone, that includes white kids as well.
Thank you, panelists, for this time that we've had. Won't you thank the panelists? Dr. King said something, and you mentioned white and other kids jumping into the protest for Black Lives Matter. Dr. King said that, and he was remarking on the white folk who were part of the movement. He said because they found out that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And so the reality is this thing can't be fixed if we don't all jump in and fix it. So thank you, panelists. Once again, we have Brother Miller, who has books available for you all if you so want to purchase one, a few, and take them home, Christmas presents and all that kind of stuff. So Sister Shamel, thank you, Sister Shamel and Brother Brendan. Thank you, my brother, for being here today. Why don't we give him one more hand again? We have some things for your refreshment as you leave out. This is how we do it here at Greece. We want to make sure you get refreshed as you go out. I don't know, anything final you want to share before we dismiss?
I would just say, just continue to be encouraged. Continue to be encouraged. As I mentioned earlier, we as a nation have gotten to this point because African Americans had fought, and we will continue to go further because we continue to fight. So just continue to be encouraged. No.
You say he's a rapper. Are you a rapper? No. Oh, that kind of rapper. Okay. Yeah, he's not an MC. Brother Brandon, you have any last parting words for us?
I'd like to encourage everyone to keep fighting and to make your voice heard on Black issues.
Thank you, Brother Brendan. And so once again, this is an annual panel discussion that we have as part of our Black History Month events. We have numbers of events this month. Tomorrow we will have our annual Heritage Sunday. Not that we haven't been dealing with heritage throughout the whole month. I'll make sure I say something about who I am. Thank God for Black History Month. But tomorrow we'll culminate it with a service directed for Black history. As well as afterwards, we will have an event down at the Wayne Bryan Center that we are co-sponsoring. Do you want to say more about it?
We're having a gospel celebration in cooperation with the Lawnside Historical Society and the Peter Motthouse Underground Railroad Museum. The performing gospel artists will be Heaven Sent and Sister Thelma and Sister Hope Bates. And we'll also be showing a part of the Emmy Award-winning film, Treasures of New Jersey, featuring the Mott House. And there will be a presentation by members of the Lawnside Juneteenth 5K Walk Run Committee who raised money for the Historical Society last year. There'll be a vendor who'll be selling food, and there'll be other kinds of vendors there as well. So that will be after the morning service. Doors open at 2. Tickets are still available. And we'll look forward to seeing lots of people and having a good gospel celebration there. The doors open at 2. Program starts at 3 p.m. And the tickets are only $20, so only $20. How you gonna holler? Can I just, yeah, don't holler. I'd like to also thank the panelists too. Really appreciate you giving your time, sharing your intellect, and the heart that you have to do this work. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Won't you stand as we pray and dismiss? Surely the panelists will be here if you want to converse with them. Lord, we want to thank you for this time, and thank you, God, for these panelists. And Lord, we thank you, Lord, for history, particularly our history. Lord, we know that there are moments in our history, Lord, that are not so great. Nonetheless, God, we're still here despite it all. Help us, Lord, to love ourselves, love people, and help us, Lord, to love history. For, Lord, in history, it is where we get to know what we have done. And, Lord, build upon that and then do something. Bless us now as we dismiss, God. May we go with your grace and mercy. Christ's name, amen. Amen. God bless you all. My panelists are here. Don't forget the books here. Oh, yeah, we gotta get